can't see you. Can I go down there? Does that still work if I'm down there? Yeah. Thanks. Sorry for those who are live streaming. What a wonderful, wonderful worship team. I love the way that you host the presence. Wow. I'm a bit of a storyteller, so I hope you like stories. It was a very typical morning for a very troubled girl. She woke up in the morning to care for her 1-year-old daughter, going about her business, doing what she needed to do, to just try to hold together the chaos of the life that she was stuck in. And as she prepared to leave the house to go and do her shopping, she was confronted by him, this man, full of rage, filled with darkness. As he fronted her and he slipped her hands around her throat and he strangled her, squeezing the life out of her. She gasped and tried to inhale, just to try to keep the life in her body. And as she looked him in the face, her eyes were filled with terror, absolute terror. Not knowing what she was going to do, she turned blue, then turned to grey, and her life was gone. Her life ended right there in that moment. She slumped to the floor. Her life had completely ebbed away and death had come to take her from her body. That wild darkness that had confronted her simply turned his back and went to his little abode, took more of the drugs that had driven him into that rage in the first place. As he returned to that room, he found her gone. Somehow, somewhere, her life had come back into her. She jumped to her feet. She grabbed that 1-year-old angel she had in the crib and ran to her friend who was waiting outside and jumped in that car, and she left and was gone, seemingly free from the brutality of years of a life of terror. Now you might be thinking, what would you do with a man like that? Surely he should be in prison. Surely at the very least you would beat him. Let him know what it was like to suffer that kind of pain and terror. That brute was me. I might get a bit emotional today. I was raised in a home that was filled with alcohol and violence. That woman, by the way, is this woman here. Come here. That was this woman right here. 45 years ago. 40 years ago. I was raised in a very, very dysfunctional home. I was a middle child of 4 brothers and had an elder sister. I was a sweet kid, a very sensitive, kind child. But the home was brutal. My mother and father had nothing but hatred for one another. We grew up, both my parents worked to try to just survive in a very poor community and raise 6 children. I had no idea what life was about. I had no idea what it meant. I was never taught social etiquette. The language we use is not a language you could use in common circles. And that day, I found my way into the drug culture at 15 years old. I progressed to being in that culture. And really I was just in the drug culture because I was in a lot of pain. And so I started, smoking pot and taking pills and different drugs. I stayed away from the really severe drugs that would kill you because I was messed up. I wasn't stupid. I wasn't ready to kill myself at that point. And then at this moment, as all the rage of my childhood began to surface in me, I turned on the only person that had shown me love in my entire life. In my home, the words "I love you" were never used, ever. None of us children experienced that. Me and my brothers, we were fighters. As a middle child, you hit and run the older ones and you beat the younger ones, and you know how it goes. And so my dad wasn't really an evil man. He was just broken. And he wasn't as brutal as my mother made him out to be. My mother was actually far more brutal than my father. She was one of 13 children raised under in a Scottish-Irish family. Her mother was brutal with her. And my mother and father met very young. My mother was 16, my father was 25. And he was half Pakistani, so he looked very young. He looked like he was 15. And so my family generations are Pakistani, Scottish, Irish, and English. So you would excuse me for being conflicted. My grandfather, my father's father, was the halal butcher for the Pakistani embassy in Sydney. His mother, we didn't know anything about my father's mother until very recently. We discovered that my father's mother was a descendant of the first settlers in Sydney who built the first settlement in Western Sydney. My middle name is Donald, so I'm named after my Scottish grandfather. And we were in a community that was just a little outside of Housing Commission, which is your poorer side of society. And we were all feral. Do you understand what feral is? Yeah. I mean, we just ran around doing crazy stuff all day long. When I was 15 years old, before I met Carol, I met a group of guys who were all older. They were from, say, 18, 19, up to, late 20s. And they were known as the Billy Bankstowners. They were a gang. And so I was the new kid on the block, so I became part of this gang. And this gang decided they would initiate me. I was a 15-year-old who knew nothing about life. I knew nothing about social context. So these people did something to me, did a number of things to me that harmed me very deeply. And during that process, there was a man with them who had just got out of prison. And he kidnapped me. And he held me captive for days. And every couple of hours he would tell me how he was going to kill me and end my life. And so at 15 years old, what was left of that sweetness of the little boy was completely fractured. I came out from that experience another person completely. From that point on, I would have been happy. In fact, my dream was I'm going to join the Air Force, and so I could fly over countries and just bomb the whole world. Because I would have been happy at that point if every human being on the planet was completely obliterated. There was nothing in me of kindness and sweetness left. I hated all of humanity. There wasn't a soul on the earth that I cared about. And I was 15 years old. It sounds horrible, and it's a horrific story. I hope it's not wrecking your brain too much, especially those of you who have visual. So by the time I got to 23, I'd become a middleman for the growers, for the suppliers. So I was really in the thick of the drug culture. At different times, I had contracts out on my life. I was being hunted down by different people because in that world, money exchange and loss of large amounts of money ends your life very quickly. Somehow I ended up without a criminal record. They never found me, they never caught me. I had some police who were friends who tended to cover me. They were in the culture, as you know. By the time I was 23, it all just came up. All the pain, all the rage, all the demonic evil that was in me. And it all let loose on this little girl. I met her when I was 17, she was 16. She worked in the first ever McDonald's in Australia. I don't know if that's anything to be proud about, but that's where we met. But at that time, McDonald's was good. It's since become something like Arby's. Yes, we actually ate at Arby's. We have been fasting and praying for cleansing from God, but it just... I think if Satan lives in America, he lives at Arby's. Right, guys? Yeah, they're all nodding. And so Carol left. She was gone. Sorry, this was my wife, Carol. And by the way, this is my friend Malcolm. Malcolm, would you just stand up and say hi? This is a very, very dear friend of mine who has loved me and cared for me since I've known him. This is my friend Marley. Marley is adorable. If you spend 2 minutes with her, you will just feel why, you'll know why I say she's adorable. So Carol left and she was gone. I didn't know what had happened. I came out of my room at that time and I just said, what? See, I thought she was dead. She was out, she was not breathing. I don't know what happened. I think Carol remembers that she just came to. Now, at this point, I thought, well, I'm done. You know, I didn't have a person in the world I thought cared about me. I was wild. But inside, still this little boy was just terrified of life. And I tried to find Carol. I jumped in my car and I went and visited all the women's refuges. And she was actually at one of those refuges, and when I came in, they hid her from me. So I couldn't find her, so I went home and I just thought, we had a little daughter. She was 1 year old. She was the most gorgeous thing I'd ever seen in my life. And the idea that she was gone, Carol was gone, was more than I could bear. And so I was left with, I just had nobody. I didn't feel loved, I didn't feel cared about by anyone. And so I was good at drugs. You know, I did that really well. I did sin really well, I did darkness really well, I did drugs really well. So I gathered some drugs together. And my plan was to just take a few different things and, you know, get high and just drift into a sleep and never come back again. And as I'm sitting at this little table knowing that there was nothing left, I was 23 years old, I was a dead man. And right at that moment, a cloud began to fill the room, like someone had... Have you ever been in a steam room? There's a cloud like you're in a steam room. And when I grew up as a child, we used to, you know, my mum was involved in the occult. You know, there was a lot of different stuff that was going on around our family. And I grew up watching a lot of horror movies, and so I knew what presence was. I used to feel I'd been visited by entities before, spirits that would open my door and walk into my room, the evil presences in a room. So I knew what it felt like to have someone in the room who was invisible and sometimes not so visible. Right as that cloud filled the room, I knew someone was in the room, but it felt different. It felt strange to me. And so, because I knew that, I mean, it sounds weird speaking into a cloud, but I don't think it's any weirder than speaking to a donkey, right? And I said, "Who's there?" And this voice spoke to me audibly out of the cloud. And that voice said this: "Jeffrey, come home and I'll put your life together the way it was meant to be." And I said, "No." I knew instantly that it was Jesus. I don't know how I knew it was him. I just knew it was him. Maybe you wonder, well, how could you say no to that? Well, I didn't know him really. I mean, I've heard of him. You know, some Jewish guy who ran around, did some good things for some people. And he was supposed to be God, but I mean, my view of God was, if God was real, he sucked. Because he's sitting up there watching this, being completely indifferent to it, if not doing it himself. And that he's responsible for this and these people. He's responsible for this world. Why would you say yes to that? So I said, I can't. I said, tell you what, because I was a drug dealer, right? So I said, I'll do a deal with you. And I still have that problem. Maybe I need to get delivered from it because I'm still doing deals, aren't I? Hi, nice to see you today. So I said, I'll do your deal. You bring my wife home and my daughter, and I'm yours, and you can do with me whatever you want. And the cloud disappeared, so I thought, that's what I thought. The indifferent God who really doesn't care about anyone in reality. Then my mind filled with a video, like a movie screen. I have a very graphic picture mind. So if you say cat, I see cats. If you say dog, I see dogs, especially the ones that bit me. I see them like clearly in here. So I have this video in my mind, and all I'm seeing is I'm seeing my own funeral, and I'm standing over here, kind of over in the distance, and I'm watching my funeral over here, and my coffin is being lowered into a grave. And my mother's standing beside my grave, blaming herself for my death. Now, I cared about my mum. I didn't like her much, but I cared about my mum. It's hard to be a kid and not care about your mum, you know. I loved her as best I guess. I felt love for her, but I didn't like her. She was mean. But all my life, I couldn't live with the idea that I'd done something to hurt another person. You know, and maybe I was schizophrenic, I don't know. But it was, you know, I had this evil and this rage and this darkness in me, but that little boy in me that had a really strong conscience and couldn't bear to rob someone. And by the way, in the drug culture, I was an honest dealer. I know no one believes that could exist, but I never ripped anyone off. I never stole from people, except the supermarket. And the newsagent, yeah, I did steal from there. But I couldn't bear the idea that I'd done something to hurt or wound another person because I knew what pain was like. And I couldn't live with, my conscience was too strong. I couldn't live with the idea that I'd done something to mar another person's life. And yet over on this side of my brain, I want to drop bombs and wipe out humanity, right? So I thought, I've got to visit my mum. So I went to my mum's to visit her. And no one in my family ever hugged, ever embraced. And all I wanted to do was, and no one ever said I love you. The word love was never expressed. So I just wanted to tell my mum that I loved her and hug her and tell her that everything was okay. So that when I did what I needed to do, they were the last memories she had. I just wanted to have a good memory because I knew it would hurt her. Because underneath it all, I think I was a favourite child, even though I was the worst one. I like to think that anyway. So I went to my mum's and I walked in and I walked over to Mum, and my mum was a big woman and like quite big. And so I threw my arms around my mum and I just said to her really close, I said, "I love you, Ma." Because I called my parents Ma and Pa after Ma and Pa Kettle, you know, from those hillbilly black and white movies. I said, "I love you, Ma." And she looked at me, she was shocked because I was hugging her firstly, and I used the word love. You'd think I'd have shot her. And she kind of stepped back. She goes, "What's wrong? What's going on?" I said, "I can't tell you the language that our family use, so I'm going to give you the G-rated version of this conversation. What's going on?" I said, "Nothing, Ma, everything's good. Everything's going to be okay. I just wanted you to know that I loved you." And I went to walk out the door. And as I'm walking out the door, the phone rang. And I don't know how I knew this. I just turned to my mum and I said, "Ma, answer the phone, it's Carol." She goes, "How do you know it's Carol?" In her angry tones. I said, "I don't know, just answer the phone, Ma, it's Carol." So she answered the phone, Carol's on the phone. And so I said, "Hi, you need to come home. God visited me at the house." Now, in hindsight, I think about that and I think that probably wasn't a good opening line. And Carol was just hysterical on the end of the phone. As you can understand, she was terrified. There was no way she was going to cop this. And so I covered the phone and I just quietly said this: "Well, if this is real and what just happened is real, and I'm not nuts and I'm not just having some weird schiz experience, this is the moment, or I guess I'm going to hell." So then I got back on the phone and it was just quiet. And I thought she actually wasn't there, so "Are you there? Are you there?" And she was quiet and peaceful. Carol tells me that when I said the name of Jesus, she just went really quiet and she knew that everything was going to be okay. But I didn't know that. So I got back on, I said, "Are you there?" And she goes, "I'm here." I said, "Jesus came to the house. If you come home, I'm going to a church on Sunday and I'm going to give my life to Jesus. I'm going to become a Christian." I didn't really know what that was going to lead to at all. If I knew, I probably wouldn't have done it, Pastor. So Carol came home. And Carol came home. And the next day, and I didn't know that you can accept Jesus at home. All right. See, I watched a movie when I was young, and God lived at churches, you know. And if you want to meet God, you have to go to a church somewhere and you have to kneel down and so he doesn't kill you. And so I went and got all my friends together, and there was about 30 of us, 35 in this drug gang. And we got all together in a house and we all brought lots of drugs and lots of drink. Because I told him I'm leaving and I wanted to have a bon voyage party. And so we all got together, and there was enough drugs in there to put me in jail for 50 years. But it was fun at the time. And so then halfway into this, and you know, I was stoned and I drank a bit, but I was still very clear about what I was doing. By the way, I didn't know that was wrong to do that, because do you realise that sinners don't know that sin is wrong? Right? They think that what you do is wrong. Right? Because sin is sin, right? Do you know why dogs bark? Because they're dogs. Right? They don't know they're barking. When you tell a dog stop barking, he looks at you like, So Well, a friend turned to me and he said, where are you going? Are you going to do the hippie trail? Because there used to be this hippie tour you could do through Amsterdam in Europe and go and take all these great exotic drugs. I said, no, I'm not going to Europe. And they said, oh, are you going to California? Because that's where the best drugs are. Because that's where the best drugs were in America. I went, no, I'm not going to California. They said, where are you going? I said, I'm going to become a Christian. I had long hair and a beard, and I was a bike rider, and they all left the room, except three. Three stayed to try to convince me that I was brainwashed. And they actually said that to me. So you've been brainwashed. And I said, well, my brain was pretty wrecked. I probably need a new one. I said, no, I'm not brainwashed. Jesus came into my house, and he talked to me, and here's what happened. And they just couldn't get their head around it at all. They hung around for a little while, and then they were gone. So the next day on Sunday, I went to church. It was the worst experience I've ever had in my life. You people were the worst experience I ever had in my life. Coming to church, sitting on the back row, and experiencing this was frightening, terrifying, tormenting, and weird. Like, you do realise that Christians are the weirdest people on earth. I mean, I thought I was into some weird stuff. I mean, you guys come into a room full of lights, play music that you don't listen to, you sing to. Yes, sometimes people even walk around waving flags. I mean, those things make me want to throw up. I see flags even to this day, and I feel nauseous when I see flags. They'll tell you. It's like flags. I'm sorry, it's just, I can't help it. So anyway, I went to church. It was a Foursquare church in Australia, and there's about 600 people in that church. And all I saw was a bunch of weird people running around waving hankies, smiling, and they weren't smoking pot or taking drugs. And that was the hardest thing, was, you know, I can't stand happy people who aren't on drugs. Right? What are you hiding? Are you faking it? Or so I sat in the back row with Carol, and I'm just agitated. And someone came, I'll never forget, someone came up to me and says, hi, what's your name? And I did this. What do you want to know for? And they just said, I just wanted to introduce myself. Well, you've done it, keep moving. And that happened a lot. I mean, I was like that even after I became a Christian for 3 or 4 months, and people would try to come and say hi, and I'd just go, yeah, you've said hi, go away, this is my space. So, and then they did the singing thing. And by the way, the worship in that place was astounding, but not to me at that point. And then they tried to make me pay to be at church, and I knew that was wrong. They tried to take money, and, you know, it's like, I thought church was free. In fact, I knew church was free, but this church is trying to make me pay an entry fee. You know? No, I didn't accept it. And I said, Carol, they want money. I thought church was free. She just patted my arm and said, Jeffrey, it's just an offering. You don't have to give. What's an offering? Well, it's when you give money to help the church do what they do. Oh, okay then. So I just passed it along. And then a guy got up to talk. And this is all I heard. Womp, 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 womp. Now, later I came to find he was a really good pastor and a good speaker, and I loved him. But then I couldn't hear anything. I didn't understand anything. I mean, he's using these weird words like redemption. So his Bible, I never knew what was in the Bible. My language was and the dog. So I was having trouble with the whole thing. And then finally at the end, the guy says, there's a clock somewhere I've got to follow, don't I? It's got 0 on it already. Okay, you see that one that says 11:45? Is that ticking? Okay, so when do I stop? No, you've got to tell me, otherwise I'll go forever. I have no sense of time. Could someone please remove that man from the church? So finally, at the end, this guy just said, is there anyone here who would like to give their life to Jesus? And I went, last. See, if he'd done that in the first 5 seconds, I would have gone out the front. And in fact, I wished he had, then I wouldn't have to suffer that whole hour and a half with all the rest of the stuff that you do in church. So I just got up and went straight out the front. And, I walked out there and I'm the only one at the front to start with. And then there was others after, but no, I wasn't there. I didn't care what it looked like. I wasn't there. I wasn't afraid of anything. I was looking for the cloud. And so the cloud wasn't there all that time. So I went out the front because it's, come out here, and I thought the cloud's going to come and Jesus is going to talk to me and tell me what I'm supposed to do, because I don't know what I'm supposed to do. So I go out the front and I kneel down. And I knelt down because I'd watched a movie called Joan of Arc when I was a kid. And in this movie, Joan of Arc, the idea was Joan of Arc had to kneel down or the angel with the flaming sword would cut her head off. So I got to kneel down because I don't want to start this thing dead. So it's true. So I knelt down, and then in my mind I'm thinking this: if I were God, what would I do with someone like me? All I could think was, I'd kill him. If I were God, I'd kill a guy like me. I would put everyone out of their misery and just get rid of this dude. So I'm sitting there not knowing what's going to happen. And then something began to touch me. Not a person. It came down like this over my head. And it felt like someone was pouring a jug of warm honey on my head. And it felt like thick, warm honey just running down the side of my head, and I was tingling everywhere I was. But then it was running inside my head, and it was the weirdest feeling. Like, I'd taken a lot of different kinds of drugs. I was into, experimenting and all the different types of experiences you could have. But this is weird. And so, it got down here, and then tears started running out of my face. Where I come from, you don't cry. Girls cry, boys die, right? So tears are under my face, and I've just gone, oh, no, don't. And I start talking, I say, don't you do it. Don't you cry. Because all I'm thinking is, no, if you cry, it's all over right there. And then this feeling gets to just here, actually, just at the base of your sternum right there, which I think is the center of your being. And as it hit there, my whole face starts quivering and I start sobbing. And then all I'm thinking is, I'm having a nervous breakdown. No, not here, not right now. And then I'm lying on the floor. My hair is covered in snot. I didn't carry tissues, right, or hankies. I didn't understand that I would be in this condition. And I don't know how long was I like that, 15, 20 minutes, I don't know. I was just a mess. And I ended up, I'm screaming and I'm wailing like, a shot pig on the floor. And I didn't know what was happening, and this lovely woman came up to me that then wasn't lovely to me. It was probably someone just like you. Her name was Helen. She was sweet, but she came up to me because she smiles like you do, and she came up and says, "Hi, sweetheart, how are you doing today?" And I just looked at her and went, "Lady, I got no idea what's going on here. I got to get out of here." So I just took off down the back, grabbed Carol, and we left. I went home, and I couldn't stop crying. I cried all the way home in the car. I got home, I'm still crying. I can't stop. I got home, I laid on the couch, and I couldn't stop crying. I cried day and night. Carol tells me I cried in my sleep. I cried for 2 weeks, and I was just terrified of what was going on. And then Carol started crying because Carol started to think I'm having a nervous breakdown. Except Carol's version of a nervous breakdown is me getting a kitchen knife and running around stabbing everyone on the planet. So she's scared. I'm scared. and I can't speak. Like I can't have a conversation. I can't say words. She's Jeffrey, what's wrong? What's wrong? I can't tell her what's wrong. I don't know. And the only words that would come out of my mouth was, he loves me. He loves me. I don't understand this. Why would he love someone like me? You know, my entire life as a child, I was beaten, bashed. I was punished for doing what I was told. I was punished for not doing what I was told. I became a Christian. And for the first 4 years of my life, I went to every church meeting I could. I went to every prayer meeting. I went to every home group. Sadly, for Carol, she got left out a lot. But I was so broken, so distressed. I just knew I needed to get fixed or I wouldn't be able to be the husband she needed me to be. And so I was 4 years like that, every altar call. And the leaders would come to me, like a nice man like you would come to me, Jeffrey, not everything is for you every Sunday. And I would just say, if you lived in here for 10 seconds, you'd be here every Sunday. You preach Jesus, I need Jesus. And so, you know, and I had to endure those sayings like, take it to the cross, brother. And we had a cross in the front of the church, a big wooden one. So I'd come here and look at the cross and go, but the cross would never take it. You know, and they used to say these things to me all the time, things I couldn't figure out and not understand. It was Christian language that I was never going to understand from that perspective. And then they had these standards. But let me say right up front, I loved the church I grew up in. It's very healing and wholesome for me. But at the same time, I was never good enough. I'd get punished if I did what they told me to do because I never did it good enough. Or I'd get punished for doing what I was supposed to do that nobody would tell me to do. I would get punished because of how my wife looked. Apparently, she was supposed to look better than she was, but no one sat with me to tell me, here's how you be a husband. I had no idea how to be a husband. My dad was cracked. So I was supposed to be a husband. It took me 25 years to work out what a husband. I'm still trying to work it out. We had 4 children. And at one point, they told Carol she couldn't have any more children after our first child. And they wanted to chop her up. And I said, no, it says in there that if you go to the elders, I'll anoint you with oil and the prayer of faith will heal the sick. So I'm going to pray, and I was reading about Hannah, who gave birth to Samuel. And I read that prayer. And so I said, I'm going to pray this, and you go and get anointed with oil, and God can do his thing. So we did that. Carol gave birth to a young man named Samuel. And Jesus healed that. We didn't have to jump through any hoops or sing 5 special songs for it to happen. And so Christianity was very difficult because my dispensation in life was everyone's going to punish you just for being you. And I'm not saying that that's every Christian or that's every church, but there's something in what we've done. There's something in what we've done where we've somehow sent a message that God just can't wait to punish you. And that somehow your sin wasn't quite dealt with at the cross. And that, you know, once you're forgiven, make sure you don't do anything else bad. And so I struggled to negotiate this relationship I had with, because I heard Jesus' voice clearly in the beginning. I knew what he sounded like, so I had no trouble hearing the voice of God. And it's been like that for me my whole Christian life. I know the beautiful sound. Yes, beautiful sound. He's warm. He's kind. He's commanding. And he's never angry. That one I couldn't get. Because I was used to anger. I mean, it could be good if you threaten me enough. Right? You know, I weigh up the cost. But he'd never threaten me. And all he'd ever say to me, I love you, Jeffrey. I'm gonna make you into what I want you to be. And I started to work out that there was a bit of a divide between what was a God who loved me when I was at my very worst, and he committed that he would make me into the person I needed to be. And I didn't need to help him. I just needed to be available for him to do that. And so I came to learn that I was his workmanship, created in Christ for good works that he predestined. I started to work out, it's all him. And I tried, I put on the suit and the tie. I mean, I look good as a Foursquare boy. And I love the Foursquare denomination, by the way. I love Pentecostals. Come on, bite your nose off, I will, Satan. I love that thing. I love Pentecostals, right? Because you're AOG, right? Tongue-talking, head-button people. I like that. I like a fight. But I just didn't get why I never quite felt. I had people who loved me dearly in the church I was growing up in. There's a lot of good people. But it wasn't so much the people, it was what we did with the message. That the message was, he loves you almost. And you just need to do all these things. Like Bible school, 139 steps to a victorious life. I was having a heart attack at the 12th step. So I abandoned that idea and I just went to Jesus. I said, I can't do this. It's just too hard. It's just too hard. I can't be all this. I just can't come from that and suddenly be this sweet, nice, hallelujah guy. And I tell you, I learnt to worship. It's my favorite thing to do. I was a worship leader for 30 years. I mean, I'm telling you, I could pack them up in a truck and take them anywhere. I love the worship. I mean, the moment I walked in here, I've been telling my guys here, hey, like Marley's one of our worship leaders, and I've been telling, hey, we need a harmonica and we need a saxophone. And I'm sitting there going, hey, harmonica, saxophone, right? I mean, and a violin, I want them. I love worship because it was the one place I could find myself wrapped in the coat of Jesus, laying on his lap and not have a care in the world. All I had to do was sing. All I had to do was open my heart and love him as he was loving me and respond to his presence, and he would love me in return. And he would transform me and transform me. And so I put on the suit and a tie and I did everything they asked me to do. But in here, I was dying. It's like, and I went to Jesus, I sat with him, I said, why are you abandoning me? Why you stepped back from me? He said, I haven't stepped back from you, Jeffrey. You've compromised your relationship with me because you want to be loved by them because my love isn't good enough for you. I've gone, no, your love is good enough. But you understand, right? Like, I can feel your hand. Do that to Jesus. He's invisible. So it's so much easier to take what you say about me than what he says, because you're physical, you're tangible. But he's invisible. And it's lucky he came in the cloud. I never would have believed the voice that wasn't in a cloud. So I struggle. I had this wrestle in my heart because I'm trying to be a Christian, trying to be good. Mostly, I just want to be a good Christian so that my wife won't ever leave me again. Because I couldn't bear the thought of that. But I could never be what people wanted me to be. Because he has a love that's so unconditional. It's almost impossible to find it anywhere else. And I was looking for it. Because when I was with him, I didn't have to be good. I didn't have to I didn't have to anything. When I was in his presence, I could just sit there and be broken. I could sit there and be scared. I could sit there and be angry. And he would just put his arms around me, love me, and I'd just be in tears, and I wouldn't be angry anymore. And I got hurt a lot as a Christian because I just wasn't that good at it. And I'll be honest with you, I really tried the Christian thing, but I totally failed at it every time I try it. So I decided I'm just going to do Jesus and see how I go. And so I would look for Jesus. And like when I walked in this morning, I stood here, I closed my eyes, and I whispered to Carol, I said, I see a presence I've never seen before. Because I see presence a lot. I said, I see a presence here I've never seen before. And it just brought me to tears. There's a beautiful presence in this place. And then Jesus began to teach me things. He pulled me aside. He had me sit with him for long periods at a time. And then he would begin to teach me something. So can I read you something? Is that okay? Again, if you hear me saying the church is crap and no good and that kind of thing, that's not what I'm saying. I love the church. I love his bride. Am I allowed to say that word here? Sorry. I'm Australian. Sorry. Sorry, Carol. I'm trying to make friends. Love has been perfected among us in this, that we may have boldness in the day of judgment, because as he is, so are we in this world. There is no fear in love. But perfect love casts out fear, because fear involves torment. The word torment here means infliction. It means to be punished. Fear involves punishment. But he who fears has not been made perfect in love. We love him because he first loved us. While I've been in the US, we've been here for about 4 weeks, Jesus has been digging into all of us. And the biggest thing that he's dug up in me, again, even though he's taken me through this whole thing to do with the fear of punishment, is a lifetime of being punished. And what it's done to me, and what it's doing to you. You see, we love him because he first loved us. I love Jesus very, very deeply. I devoted myself to him, and anything he wanted me to do, I made him a promise. If you tell me what to do, and I know it's you, I'll do it. So I've done some crazy stuff, because he's not necessarily not crazy, right? I mean, the guy came to the earth and then left it to us. There's a little bit of nuts in that, in my thinking, right? You know what I mean, yeah? It's a problem I got with him that, and I commonly answer, why'd you leave? I promised him that I would do whatever he told me to do. And so I do my best to do that. And so what he's dug up and what he's been digging up and what he continues to dig up is, Jeffrey, I love the world, the love that is immeasurable. And in my love, there is no demand. But they don't know that, just like you don't know that. And all the transformation that they need is in that. And until you know that, you cannot be conformed into his image. I was at a Bible school one day and I was speaking and I asked them, how many here, you're really working hard at being Christ-like? And every hand went up. And I said, why would you set yourself up for failure? Like, he's God. I mean, really? You're going to try to be like God? The last guy who did that ruined the planet. So I just said this to him. I said, I tried to do that thing, but I figured, I think it'd be easier for me if I just be Jeffrey full of the Holy Ghost. And that's about as good as it's going to get. So in all my weaknesses, all my shortcomings, the best I'm going to get is being full of the Holy Spirit and letting him work this out. And so I'll do what the New Testament teaches. You know, I like the Old Testament, but it's like I love the New Covenant because I'm not Jewish. Right? I'm not saying the Old Covenant's bad. I'm just saying it's not my covenant. You know, God made that with Moses and his mates. I didn't make the New Covenant. God didn't make the New Covenant with me. The Father made a covenant with his Son, and his Son ratified it by his blood. And he invited me into that, into him to become a beneficiary of everything he did. So it was an unconditional thing for me. Jeffrey, come home. I'll do it all. You just come home. So trying to figure out what home was, that was the big thing. So I worked out that coming home was coming to my Father's house. And I just wanted to be in my Father's house. And I wanted to live a life that represented my Father. Because I've been there, he took me there, and I met him. And he's delightful. He's funny. He's warm. I don't know how I cannot understand how this guy could ever be angry. He was so overwhelming. I'm a grandfather now. I have 11 grandchildren. I feel like the richest man on earth. He's a grandfather. Is that, when you become a granddad, you kind of get out of parent mode. You're no longer living in the fear of failure and responsibility for everything they do. You just love them and give them back to the people who are going to wreck them, right? I love, my 50s were wonderful because I could just love these kids. And it didn't matter to me whether they were going to do a bad job at school. I just, that's your fault. I didn't have to bear. I could just be the gracious, loving, kind, benevolent dad. But that's what he's like. And that's what he's been like for me. And I've been in this now 40 years. I'm still not past this love of his. That he keeps breaking me over and over with these tides of his love. And it keeps going deeper and deeper and deeper. And he keeps finding all these things. He keeps finding that little boy in me at all different levels and in all different events. And we've all been raised under incredible pressure to be something we were never created to be. And we don't know how to be that. So we're just doing the best we can so that someone will love us. Am I right? We just want to be loved. See, everywhere I've been in the world, and I've been some places, I've led over 50,000 people to Christ, seen well over 100,000 people healed miraculously with blind seeing, deaf hearing. And I only have one message. My Father loves you. I don't know much about anything else, but I know this. He will never punish you for anything you ever do, yesterday, today, or forever. Look, Satan is at the door, right? And he's waiting for you to do anything that will give him permission to come in and beat the hell out of you or beat you into hell. But my Father's not waiting at the door. He's right here. He's in the house. He's in the house. This is the house. It's a beautiful church, but this is not the house. This is the house. And Papa's in the house. And he's here to will and to do his good pleasure. He's here to transform. He's here to do it. So I learnt this. And by the way, prayer to me is just having a conversation. Is that okay? Is that, I haven't kind of made you sound like a heretic or anything by saying that. Prayer is a conversation with God. And so I don't know how not to pray all the time. It's just habitual for me to talk to my friends and talk to Carol and to talk to Jesus and to be real and to be open and to be transparent. So I learned that if I simply be honest and open and transparent with him, he'll be honest and open and transparent with me. I've learnt that if I hang out with his kids, I will learn social skills. Thanks. If I hang out with the family, he likes family. So if I hang out with the family, there's going to be some who will hear what I'm not hearing, who will see what I'm not hearing. And some will become the arms of the invisible God in the visible realm. When I was a young Christian, I got to stop calling him a big fat cop. It was a policeman who was plump. And he would come find me every Sunday morning and he would throw his arms around me. And I would just do that. And then one day I'm watching a television show and this girl starts singing, "Why don't you let somebody love you?" And all I hear is Jesus saying to me, "Why don't you let somebody love you, Jeffrey?" And I went, "You mean the plump cop, right?" And me and cops were, it's like oil and water. So the next time he came to me, he put his arms around me, held me, and go, "I love you, Jeffrey." And I'm like, "Oh, how gay." Oh, am I allowed to say that? Edit. Sorry. Sorry, I don't mean, sorry if I get in trouble. Just say I'm not coming back. That was just that era, okay? For those who thought, sorry. It was just, I was terrified, I was an abuse victim as a child, quite a severe one. And so it's now or never, so I draped my arms around this man. And I melted. I put my head on his shoulder. It was the most beautiful experience of my human existence apart from Jesus. So I melted into his arms, and this just deep, pure love of a good man who was a pastor's son poured over my heart. For the first time in my life, I felt physical affection apart from my wife that ruined me forever. And so now I hug a lot because that's what he taught me. He taught me love has arms and legs. And so you will never be punished for anything you've done, you do, or you will ever do here. See, sin does not separate you from God. For I'm convinced that neither death nor life, nor principalities, nor powers, nor things present, nor things past, nor any other thing can separate us from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus. And the fear of punishment that religion has driven, and the shame that's come out of the Adamic fracture has been used in this world which is ruled by Satan to manipulate and to control us, to prevent us ever figuring out that both he who sanctifies and those who are sanctified are of the same substance. Therefore, he's not ashamed to call them brothers. See, he's not ashamed to call me his brother. And when you start to experience Jesus not being ashamed of calling you his brother or his sister, then your shame starts to disappear. And when he pulls all that fear of punishment out of you, now imagine not having shame and not having the fear of being punished. Well, that's a very secure human being who isn't afraid to do whatever their master asks them to do. And you know, one day the Lord put me in a trance. Actually, there was two following each other. And he took me to this place and he showed me these two things. This is about 10 years ago, and he said to me, this is what you got to do, Jeffrey. My love for every human being on the planet is identical for the whole as to the one. And there isn't one that's excluded from my love for them. And it's the fear of punishment and the shame that is keeping them from the life I've died to give them. And and we get raised with a lot of this stuff, so we just take it into Christianity. You understand that, right? Maybe for you, I'm an extreme version. But I've been in a lot of places in the world, and all I've found is people are desperate just to feel loved, just to know that they're loved, and that there's a love that's greater than their ability to screw up. And the grace of God that I found has been overwhelmingly greater than my ability to screw up. And my wife will tell you, oh, have I screwed up? Like, I don't do anything in small degrees. I wish I could. It's Carol. She's lovely and delightful. I'm the guy who's going to jump just because it's there to see what happens. And he's always there to catch me. And he's always there to cover me, even in the worst screw-ups. And there's incredible grace and kindness that he has. And he wants you to know that he loves you and that he's got you. Jesus has us in his hand, and the Father has Jesus in his hand. And no one can snatch us from the Father. And if we just, as weird as it may seem sometimes, hang out with the family, because really you're the weird one, right? Like, look at Steve. He's not normal. He's weird. Steve is my dear friend. There's no two of us the same. We are so unique, extraordinarily unique and wonderfully made. That it's time to get away from clone Christianity and get healed up and let the Father's love come on in and pull that pain out of there so we can come and express, be the resonators of his image. His love created us, and so we are a manifestation of the love of God. And Satan's work is to mar the resonation chamber, to damage it, so that as God expresses himself in us, it doesn't come out as it should. And so he's here to heal the world. For God so loved the world. I'll finish, I think, on this, and then we pray. Is that okay? For God so loved the world that he gave his son. But he added this extra verse. He did not send his son into the world to condemn them. And yet the message they've heard all over the world, because I've been there, is there's this big God up there, the big guy. And he's got a rule book. And if you tick the boxes, he'll bless you and make your life good. And if you don't tick the boxes, he's going to throw you into a lake of fire, and where you're going to be tormented for all eternity and suffer with weeping and gnashing of teeth for all eternity. And by the way, he loves you. And he wants your money. That's not the message I got. That's the message the world has got. Now, they didn't get that message themselves. We gave them that message. We, the Church of Jesus Christ. And we misrepresented our Father to that world. And my Father is coming in this time. There's a move of God beginning. And it's tender, and it's sweet. It's the most powerful anointing I've ever seen or ever felt. And I've seen people blind from birth have their eyes open. I've seen moves of God that have flattened 1,000 people in a room and they're out for hours. This coming upon us is the most powerful thing I've ever seen. And you know where we're used to demons coming out of somebody? You know, there's a bit of work in it and they're floundering around. And this is just this anointing that's deep in the Father's love just comes upon someone. And demons just get out of there as fast as they can. And miracles are coming and they're going to be so easy. You know, we're going to be, you know how the cancer deal? I tell you, you guys have got a problem with cancer here. I mean, we have a problem with cancer. You guys, I don't know what's going on in America, but you guys have got cancer like a hot breakfast. I've run into more cancer victims on this trip than anywhere I've run into cancer in the world. And it's staggering. God's going to make cancer a thing of the past in the church. Because Papa's coming to the house. About 12 years ago, he took me into a vision and he showed me the state of his house. Settled in the midst of the state of the world. And he made it very clear to me he's coming to his house. He's coming to the world. And corporations are going to fail. CEOs are going to leave by the thousands. Governments are going to be, this is 12 years ago, governments are going to be overturned. Ministries in the church are going to topple. Heads of ministries everywhere that have failed to care for his kids are going to topple. And he's going to replace them with lovers. The apostolic fathers are coming to the church. Now, I'm not big into titles, okay? I'm using those titles, but I'm not the guy who runs around calling people apostles and prophets and that stuff. You know, I got a name, it's Jeffrey, that'll do me. But the Father is, at this point, releasing apostolic fathers to the church. And they're going to start popping up everywhere. And these are just going to be men who come with astounding power for the sake of the children. Not for the sake of a ministry. Not for the sake of a career. And they're going to set things in order in the house. They're going to put his house in order because they're coming to represent the Father. See, when the Father's coming to do this, he puts arms and legs on it. And so I'm calling it the Apostolic Fathers just for, I don't have any other language. It's coming to the church. It's coming here. It's coming to America. It's coming everywhere. It's going to be a worldwide thing. It's starting to happen everywhere. It's just starting to trickle up. God's going to heal his house. And the kids are going to be taken care of. And we're going to start being able to grow up into him and do the fullness of the measure of the stature of Christ that he always intended us to grow up into. And the world is going to get smacked by loving God. And this idea that we're going to be hiding over there in that corner while the Antichrist is beating the door down. No. All the earth shall be filled with the glory of the Lord. The Father didn't send Jesus to die at the cross to hand it back to Satan. He went to the cross to take it back from Satan. And he's not going to hand it back to him. He came to take it back. And that's why he left. He left, gave us the Spirit. He's going, go get him, kids. And we're entering into that day, which I think is going to be one of the most astounding times in history since the coming of Christ. I think it'll make the Reformation look like a kid's tea party. This is an extraordinary time to be alive. And no one in his house is going to miss out. No one is going to miss it. It's not going to be a move of God for the third wavers. It's not going to be a move of God for the Pentecostals. It's not going to be for the Catholics, for the Anglicans. Papa's coming to his house. And if you like, you know, the charismatic movement swept the entire church to some degree. This thing is going to take the house back for the Father. And we will represent our Father. And we will represent him well. And the world will look and say, they're the disciples of the living God. Because of the way they love one
Is that okay?